This video is about hockey, precisely a stat that I would want if I were to coach a hockey team. Me and hockey started out in college. I was at a club one weekend night drinking and dancing, and a friend of mine said he was going to a hockey game. I thought he was just drunk, but turned out the University of Kentucky club team played their games back then at a very small rink at midnight on the weekends. I was a big football fan until then, but I immediately fell in love with hockey, and I hardly missed a game when I was living in Lexington, Kentucky after that experience. The game just kind of makes sense. It's the game that fathers made for their sons to keep their game fair and honest. Otherwise, there would be no timeout in the game at all. A game invented when fair fight was not only honest but manly. Sometimes it's just better to let them fight, get it out of their system, because holding a grudge just gets in the way of a good game. Can't have fun when you're mad. And then it's only part of the game because of the frustration of trying to skate, having to control a puck with a very large stick, and nowhere to be on the ice at any moment, and then have some jerk aggravating the crap out of you the entire time you're trying to do it. I can barely skate on the ice, and I've never played a game, but I've been watching it for 30 plus years. And since I've never played, I think about what it would be like to coach a team. Well, I'd rather really just be assistant coach. The whole responsibility of coaching is just, but I love to suggest things. I've developed several strategies I think the game overlooks about itself. Worked out some traditions in hockey that are absolutely and at its foundation highly incorrect. And I've made unique conclusions about previous rule changes in its history that the game really hasn't considered correctly. I think there are 9 mistakes made on how hockey is played, and I'd like to know if correcting them would make a winning team. This started when I wrote about one of those mistakes in an assignment while getting my MBA. And I've named these 9 changes the Hibbsean Hockey System, after myself, of course. Several of the stats that hockey keeps are useless to me, but one that I invented and would want as a coach would be what I call the 10 skate offensive time, or 10 SOT for short. The reason why I want this stat is specific for my own system, but anyone could see how this would be helpful, so I thought I would share it, especially for the team that I have season tickets to. So I took snippets of video to get an accurate measurement for this one game. I'm not including sound, and I don't own the SPHL stuff, so this is my own work with hours of editing and including text over top, so there's no copyright claims. The video is just my way to keep track of the statistic. If you want to watch the game, you'll have to work out with the SPHL about that. But if you're not familiar with the SPHL, it's the Southern Professional Hockey League, and that would be an A level of professional players. It feeds players into the ECHL, formerly known as the East Coast Hockey League, and it's a double A league that feeds players into the AHL, or the American Hockey League, and that would be like the Triple A, and that feeds the NHL. As far as I can tell, the SPHL is the only adult league on the planet that only has one referee, professional or otherwise. In America, you would need a league for kids under 12 to find only one referee. I'm not sure why the SPHL is hung up on treating its players and fans like kids, but I'll move on. It's my biggest hang up with the SPHL. Back to one of my stats, that the 10 skates offensive time starts out with a 60-minute game in 3 20-minute periods. We're wanting to measure how much time all 5 skaters are in the offensive zone in those 60 minutes. I subtract the penalties in minutes because there are only 4 players on the ice at this time. For this game, Evansville had 12 minutes in penalty time. That gives us 48 minutes of time that we could have 10 skates inside the offensive zone if the puck started in our zone and never left it. This is unrealistic. But let's say there's a perfectly even game, and let's say we were measuring from the center line. By the way, this is a stat I would want too. If we were measuring from the center line, we would expect that half the time in the game would be near 50%. So 24 minutes for Evansville in this game. The time that it would be missing is the time it takes our team to change. Again, a perfectly even game, offense and defense, so changing would only be missing factor for the center line stat. So our 10 skates offensive time would be excluding changes and time it takes to transition out of the center of the ice. Just as far as logic can take us, it could be so entirely even that neither team could get out of the center. If players were, say, geriatric and perfectly even, like they moved really slow, you get what I'm wanting. The amount of time my team has the most opportunity to score, and that's when 10 skates are in the offensive zone. The video that is playing out is only the 10 skates in the offensive zone for Evansville. I tried to be very generous at times, considering some players have the puck but are straddling the line, or they go in and out of the line within seconds. I tried to only stop the timer if they are intentionally leaving offense. Out of the 48 minutes of play with 10 skates, Evansville only had 10 skates within the offensive zone for 8 minutes and 34 seconds. That's 514 seconds out of the 2,880 seconds possible. Our percentage of how often Evansville had all 5 players in the offensive blue line is just shy of 18%. Before we go on to what this number means, or what it could be, let's just say that this game went into overtime and Evansville won. Our stat doesn't count overtime because it's played short-handed, or as I like to say, short-footed, short-skated. Anyway, we already know the talent isn't lacking in Evansville, or they wouldn't have won considering they only spent 18% of their time as a team in the offensive zone. So what should this number be? How much time does a team take to change? And how much time in a game is taken to transition through the center of the ice? So just to come up with a plausible number, let's just figure half of our time is needed to change and transition. This would be highly unrealistic, but I think this very generous amount of time. It would leave us 12 minutes to be 10 skates on offense, and we didn't meet this with only 8.5 minutes. When I asked ChatGPT how much time it takes a hockey team to change during a game, the answer was negligible, because changes should only occur during stoppages. Even AI knows this should be the case. However, most changes need to occur on an average minute. Some shorter and some longer, but my guess is that on an average minute, a player should change off the ice. If it takes a player 5 seconds to get off the ice and a new player 5 seconds to get on the ice, say they're in the far corner, and they got to skate all the way to the bench and back, right? Then we got 10 seconds during the clock time to change. Let's say half of our changes are during clock play. So that's 30 minutes, so 30 times we would have a 10-second player change. That's 300 seconds. And let's say we're the most efficient at changing all the players we need in those 10 seconds. So all we need is those 300 seconds, or 5 minutes. Logically, I can say that transitioning out of our defensive zone and through the center should not take half our time either. In an even game, there are 3 zones. So this should be divided in thirds, not in half. 48 minutes divided by 3 is 16 minutes in each of the 3 zones if Evansville is just as equal playing defense, transitioning, and playing offense. Evansville played 8.5 minutes in the offensive zone. And if we take the 5 minutes out for changing, it still leaves us 11 minutes. We still didn't make it. But not all changes happen during playing offense, so this should really only be 3 minutes for changes, which is even worse. This makes our 10 skaters on the offensive time target at 13 minutes. My conclusion for the 10 skates offensive time stat is that it's a good indication of where you're spending your time on the ice. This stat proves a very low amount of offensive presence, even as a new stat without any history to back it up. In Evansville's case here, the 10 skates on offense stat shows that it is talent that won this game, not strategy. Call me if you need an assistant coach. Thanks for listening.